Well, this is our first stop on our 2025 Kicking Bear Habitat Day tour. So it's a great cause, but most of all, we get out with a bunch of great people and look at the habitat. So appreciate you guys being here, and we're gonna have a lot of good questions, and this is our first stop. If you're standing in this mowed trail, you're standing in switchgrass. So if you're wondering what switchgrass looks like, go right back here by Dylan's feet. You see the red stems. So all those that have the red stems right there, that's all switchgrass. And so I just mowed that within the last 3 days. And that's how much it grows back. That was mowed last week or a week and a half ago. So you can see how much it mowed since then, or grew up. And then this is just standard height over here for where it's at for now. You can see how tall it will be later on in the summer. So we talk about those layers. You guys walk by a little bit of switch right back there. We have the layers and shrub pockets up by the house. And this switchgrass layer is really important. It runs for about 200 yards behind me. It's up to 80 feet wide. And that gives us a really good buffer. Someone asked how often we run into deer out here. Unless it's at gray light, those deer are typically bedding in off this edge at least 50 to 75 yards. The switchgrass greatly helps with that because then they feel comfortable being at a potential hunting plot that we have right back here that we're going to go take a look at. So it pulls their comfort level out, and that's why we have the switchgrass. The switchgrass also, you can imagine this entire edge with the sumac, the gray dogwood, and the briers is just incredible escape cover for pheasant and turkey nesting poult. And so that's why I think this edge, because we have this times 3 miles in varying widths, really helps. And we have tons of rabbits, but rabbits are the easy part. If you know grouse, pheasant, they're pretty tough. To get nesting cover for poult, that's a tough one too. But that all starts with all these layers going in, but the layers help protect us when we're walking in, not spooking deer. It really serves a lot of purposes with helping wildlife, but it's all about those layers. And kind of like we didn't do all of this just for one stand location, but a lot goes into one blinder stand location in what we're doing. So I want to point out, you can start to see some briers coming in the switchgrass. You can see some back here. Those briers will greatly diminish the switch. So when we ride around here, you can look at the non-brier areas. The switch will be 6-7 feet tall, very thick, really good stem diameter. And then you get mixed in with the briers and the height goes down a couple feet, the stem diameter shrinks, it falls over easier. And it's just an example of why it's so important to get the weeds out of switchgrass, let alone food plots, everything else. Briers are tough. This was all briers here. So we never plowed or dissed this. We brush hogged it, sprayed it, planted switchgrass the following year, got it ready the year before. What's nice about that is briers are a monoculture. They don't let anything else grow for years anyways. So when you get rid of them, switchgrass can flourish. The problem is briers always come back. And we're at that point 4 years later where they always come back. So next year, the plan would be, we always run late on this, but in March, when the weather's getting good, we're about to experience spring green up, maybe late March, where there's enough cover out there. It's not deep snow, obviously. Be a great time to come in here and brush hog this. And then that will help that switchgrass compete with that brier. Because you can see these briers started at this height this year, and they're just growing from here. So if we can get that down, that switchgrass will go over it. There's Garland we can spray on it to get rid of the briers, to get rid of the any sumac, especially aspen in areas. It'll kill that too, where the 2,4-D doesn't as well. So then we can spray it at that time. We're very concerned. I always get into that time frame when I say late, that we'll get into the nesting period. And so we try so hard. We took out 39 nest robbers this year, 28 raccoons, 10 possum, 1 skunk. We've worked on this habitat for so long we've seen pictures so far this year of poult and video. And so you get to that point where you're getting good nesting habitat and having sustainable populations. Last thing I want to do is go take a couple nests out mowing. So we get in, I kind of get nervous where before we just mow later like this right here and hope we didn't see anything, but we have a lot better population of those birds now. So especially 2 fawns. So I wouldn't mind mowing you know, 2 or 3 weeks from now. But then the problem is you're not going to get full height of the switchgrass you want full height for by hunting season. So that's kind of where we're at. That balancing period is just stay off it for a couple months, and we missed that time this year. So, which is the way it goes a lot of times, but we'll make sure we hit that next year on all these problem areas. And there'll probably be areas, there's areas in this strip right here, and you'll see it when we come out the other side where it's clean. Like this is clean right here. And well, it's starting to get dirty up there, but we'll take out the areas that we need to with the briers. We'll be able to see it really easy then, and the other areas we'll just leave alone. Rather not cut it if we don't have to. So, but again, this switch serves, you can see the height that'll be, really helps hide back here. And what we did with this food plot, we could have expanded this to an acre if we wanted to in here, but then it would have been totally exposed to the ag field. So it's more important to get a 1/4 acre hidden than an acre that's unhidden, and we spook deer every time we go in and out. So I feel confident we can ride the bikes, walk through here, and not spook deer that would be on the inside in here. And we'll go take a look at this. So it's a really cool setup in here. This is Jen's dad and stepdad are here, right by each other back here. And so it's kind of nice at all these events, family events, we have the whole family. And that's always meant a lot to me, let alone Jen. So to have both her dads right here is pretty cool. And then Greg, this is a Greg special that I'm standing on. Does it look okay, Greg? Like it's assembled properly, I think. But Greg made this for one of our, this blind was over in Coon Valley. We're no longer hunting there. So we moved it over to this spot. And so this is, I think Wes said he's going to extend this portion and put a railing right here or something. I don't know. But we just put this in, and this was a long time coming. Dylan and we talked about this, I believe, 3 years ago, putting this in here. And kind of scouted out this flat area and said, man, this would be a great spot for a setup, especially the little food plot. And it was a long time coming. It's just you add layers every single year. I mean, just around the property, things we do. So we really like this because it's completely hidden. That's why I remowed the trail. So it had a little bend into it. So you can't just walk on the main trail and look right in here. Everything's hidden. There's a brush pile behind Chad back there. That brush pile, when this was first cleared, I was on a client trip, and they always tell me to mark things really well when I leave. I do not. So things have to be moved when I come back. That was on me. I envisioned this over here in this corner, ended up right down there. Well, right down there in the throat of this food plot, we're actually going to walk right down in this food plot, come around, and we'll walk through here. That goes over the little ditch that comes up into this draw. And then you go through that ditch, and it goes directly to that water hole where Jen shot Ocho at. So it's all in this line of movement. It's already a great crossing at the ditch. It's already a great crossing at the top of the ditch over here. And then this is a flat in between. The big food plot that helps support this movement, that's 2.5 acres, is about 250 yards that way. So that supports a lot of great movement. We have big food across the hollow and on the other side. So this is that really good interior area. That's where Ocho lived a lot. We saw him many days during the daylight. And so it's just a natural fit, really easy to get in and out. And I don't know, like, I rarely hunt out of blinds with a bow. I love hunting out of the blinds, muzzleloader in gun season. But I love when we have a setup like this. We'd rather be 5 feet off the ground, hidden, where we can shoot a bow out of the horizontal window in front and just cover that whole thing, and it's well hidden. So we'll just see what's out here when we come through here. But it was a really good fit. The bear area where you're at, I know we're going to have a lot of aspen shoots coming in. I had the operator just skim over that, so he didn't really dig through it too much. So there's a lot of roots, there's a lot of aspen shoots, briars, a lot of growth that takes place. We also seeded this with switchgrass. So if the switchgrass got to 3-4 feet this year, offered a thick covering, and we had stuff coming up through it, it's not to have switchgrass in the long term, it's to fill in something with 3 to 4 feet and pretty thick. We've had it in 1 year grow thick enough to support rabbits during the winter time with 4 or 5 inches of snow or 7 inches of snow, you know, packed on the ground. So in the front of this, you know, this is getting to the stand. Well, we don't want the deer to come any closer than this. we put the silky willows across the front. There's 12 of them. And then we put a fence screening across in front of that so the deer can't get to it. Deer don't typically eat silky willows. But Greg, they eat everything, right?
They eat anything.
So he's up north by Hayward. He has camp and 1.1 acres of food plots.
1.3.
Yeah. But it's probably more of a set number than that, even 1.27 or, but both mechanical engineers. So, but I've seen his charts of his food plots. But you find that if things that won't be eaten are next to things that are readily eaten, they get eaten. And so we found that out with many different plantings. And so putting the fence across, and we went one step further when we cut down some of the aspen. We brought the dead aspen in, placed them neatly around those cuttings, and those cuttings are coming in really nice. You can see if you guys poke in here. What we're going to do, we'll wrap around here and then right in front of the blind and come through. You can see like we actually have a deer trail that connects to the one we walked through in that valley, right behind you in that corner, and that still comes right through the woods over on this side, so we didn't want to block that. We'll hunt this with our wind going out this way. And again, we don't expect the deer to be in this range right here, but not very far in, 50 yards. And whereas if this was all open, they'd be in another 100 yards down in the woods. So when you add up 3 miles of edge and you lose 50 to 100 yards of bedding all the way around because you have open or high hunting pressure, or deer can see you drive by on the outside, that's a lot of acres that you lose, potentially half of your property or a third of your property. We don't have that depth, then you don't have does and fawns bedding up here closer to the fields and room for bucks down in the bottom. In this case, in the bottom, if it was going up, it'd be the opposite. You guys have any questions for this area?
Are you concerned about the wind, like a north wind swirling back this way, or are you far enough?
We're far enough and we're high enough up that we get pretty good wind flow in this range right here. So we really need more, I believe north is about right that way. So we need easterly winds to push out here, and easterly winds in the morning. Now, if we had light winds, let's say it was the perfect east wind blowing out this way we want. If we had light winds in the evening and to the point where it's getting down to nothing, even though they're east, they could start to trickle back downhill. So if we have a sustained wind of 5, 6, 7 miles an hour and it's blowing pretty good up into the fields and it's steady, meaning it's not getting to zero an hour after dark, then we're probably safe. But if you see in the forecast that it's getting down to 0 to 2 miles per hour within a half hour of dark, you're probably going to be in trouble. It could start to, this isn't as extreme. Some of the areas we hunt, like we'll go to the bench water hole where I shot a buck last year. In that case, the wind is just, I mean, you're looking down, it's really steep. It's a bench that's 23 yards to the water hole, and then 10 feet behind there, it goes really steep down. So in that case, there's more of a pull immediately. Right here, it's not as bad. Anybody else?
You have a water hole here?
No, but we do have one 150 yards that way. And so we have them about, there's a water hole there. There's a water hole across, like at an angle, the hollow on the other side, probably straight as a crow flies, 400 yards, but ground coverage, it's 500-600 yards. The next water hole this way is probably about 400. So our water holes are spread out about 400 to 500 yards apart, right around there. And then they're in between, like this, we'll put a small hunting plot in between a water hole and a big food plot over there. And so we can have that movement. And that's what you find is, it's not like a buck goes from big food plot to little food plot to water hole to small food plot to the next water hole, but he'll go hit 2 or 3 of those at a time. And we'd see that with Ocho last year. He'd hit that water hole, then he's over at this water hole, he's going through a small food plot over there, and then he disappears. It's not like they keep just running that line. And I think a lot of times it had to do with, I mean, it could be a whim. We don't see like a consistent, he only does this during certain wind. But you really get the feeling sometimes that they're running a certain edge because they have a wind advantage, meaning they're scent checking on the inside for does. So they're just at the top of the ridge getting that good flow.
Do you have a rule of thumb for that line of movement? Like putting a water, like you said, you have food plot here, water hole 150 yards away. Like, do
to keep them on that line of movement, what are some factors you look at and things that you add to keep them moving?
It's kind of like, first of all, the most important thing with the line of movement is identifying the line of movement before you put the habitat features in. So in this case, it could be an inside corner in flatland, inside corner of a field where they're going to cut that corner. It could be that there's a swamp in the middle of the woods and they're going to cut that outside line of that swamp, and you're just connecting those dots. And that's the way that buck habitat change, a cut line. So those deer are going to follow that line anyways. And then you're kind of like if you're hunting public land, you're looking at all these habitat changes, lay of the land, saddles, benches. Well, a buck's going to move through anyways, and then you're adding those features to support it. In this case, we're looking for areas where there's a 2.5 acre food plot here, 250 yards away. And then across on the other side, we have about a 3.5 acre food plot with a small one and a bigger one, combination. Other side of that, we have a 2 acre field. Then we have 1.5, we have 4.5 in the back. So you're identifying those big areas, but then in between that is where you're filling in to where it makes sense. This is an area it would have been a great area for water hole. We could have put a water hole here because it's the same movement, but it's also a great spot for a small hunting plot where we have the water hole, we couldn't have put a food plot. And so you just kind of, and we'll go through on the back side, you're going to see like a medium-sized plot, a smaller one, a water hole, a bedding area. And it's that line that covers 400 yards, but we fit it in, and it progressively gets more reclusive the closer you get to the bedding area.
Yeah, I'm just more curious because I'm going to be getting my land, the core kind of logged off this winter and create that hard edge. And I was just kind of curious, what could I do to make sure they're staying on my property and away from...
Well, one of the things too is parallel to your borders. So that's a big thing too. And when you keep those deer running parallel to your borders, that's a big advantage because there's a reason for them to go to that water hole to visit this small hunting plot. It takes time for them to do so. And if they're moving through during the daylight, they're not moving all day long. So typically they're just moving in the morning and the evening. So if they're moving in on their feet for a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour before dark or after daylight, then by the time they hit a couple habitat features, then you're keeping them in that line of movement, keeping them on your property. Also, we put a mock scrape at every stand location. We'll walk by one right over here. One more thing that helps sweeten the line of movement. So whether it's water holes and mock scrapes or just a mock scrape, the hunting plot, we have a spot that Dylan and I set up yesterday, and we had a mature buck hit that scrape within 2 hours on that one.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. We had bets on another one we put over here. We didn't really bet much, but it was within 3 hours, within 6 hours the next morning, and it was 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 20 minutes, something like that. A doe was hitting it on a mock scrape. But those are all really important for that parallel movement, time management. So, and keeping them on your property. They only have a certain amount of time they're going to spend during the daylight. So if you link those features they want to go to, and it's kind of like if you put the big food plot right in the middle of it all, and it doesn't give you enough room on either edge for good cover or remote cover or reclusive cover, then you hurt the movement too. So you're fragmenting it. You're breaking it up with too much big food. That we could have, you could put a bunch of big food by the house, but then I like that whole hollow to be pretty remote. And Chad, I don't know if you've noticed over the years, but we're seeing more and more mature bucks up in this end right here. And I know when you drive by, you'd see them out in the fields. Yeah. But we didn't see as much up in this pocket the first couple of years. And it seems like every time we filled in, we put more and more that settle up into this area. But we have probably completed, say 6 acres of cuttings down here, that probably 10 different cuttings in the top of that hollow. And then side cuttings off that going into the woods that you guys will see today. But that's like the big end we're capping it with, and then everything spills out this way. We can't really lose them too much going that way because it's the neighbor's house over there. Not this one, but down the road a little bit. And then there's no woods for a few hundred yards in any direction. So that's kind of like that end. So if it's a hollow end and it's big open timber and it's not supported by food, then we're just wasting a big end of our property that we could hold deer and actually protect them for a good length of time.
Jeff, would you ever put a mock scrape at some place where you don't have a stand, like in a transition zone maybe?
Yeah, only if it's an area where it's not a huge attraction. So like a water, it more defines movement. I wouldn't do that with a water hole, because then you're potentially drawing deer away from a stand location. Where a mock scrape, I don't think they're going to go 150 yards out of the way just to hit a mock scrape. I'd do it if it was a spot where we could get a good, maybe I didn't want to hunt there. Maybe it was a spot where I knew there's some nighttime movement and I just wanted to get a good inventory of bucks or what that were going through there, and I'd stick a camera on it. But in generally, you know, that might be 1 to 10. You know, so you'd have, it wouldn't be that you'd have 10 of those on a 80-acre property. You might have 1 or 2. We've had them on over in Coon Valley. We had a spot we couldn't bow hunt on those food plots because you can't walk in without spooking a deer. It went up from there. And so we had a mock scrape there. We ended up getting 34 bucks, different bucks on that throughout the year, but we'd have the camera, scrape, and then the food plot. So we got some really cool photos and videos there in that spot. It was a great inventory of what bucks were in the area. And we couldn't hunt over it with a bow. We could shoot to it with a gun stand from 175 yards, 178 to be exact.
Jeff, I got a question more related to the switchgrass. When you plant the switchgrass right up, but you're creating the layers, you find that you're losing an edge and losing a potential scrape line for bucks to use when you have the switchgrass and softening that edge right up to this and then right up to the woods. You're kind of losing that edge and the potential for a scrape line there.
You definitely would if it's an area you want scrapes. So like in this area, there was a thought back in the day that more scrapes meant you'd have more bucks on your property. So I've been to a property in the UP of Michigan. It was 160 acres. They had 200 rope scrapes down the center of their property on an interior logging trail. And they were taught that 200 scrapes would equal all the bucks in the area for 5 miles around to be on their property. It's not the way it works. It just defines travel. I like seeing those scrapes, but I'd rather keep those scrapes on this line in here that we're on that line of movement that we're trying to hunt. It's kind of like we put a mock scrape in here, and you know, where do people put a camera? We want to put a camera in a mock scrape where we expect to kill the deer. So we don't want to kill them out there. We're just setting ourselves up for coming in and out. So, but then that to me puts more of a priority on these scrapes where we want them to be on the travel corridor.
But if you were to say keep hunting the edge and have a food plot, this was your plot up here and you were hunting more in the field, then keeping that more defined edge would be?
I still like the big food plot over here, and our food plots, most of them, they're surrounded in switchgrass. And then at our stand locations, we have that scrape. So, and what we find is, I'm thinking on the blade back here, they'll like hollow out an area in the switch right under a tree if it's on the interior like that. If all of a sudden a random scrape will pop up. But we're not specifically leaving those edges open to create scraping. Some of the areas we don't put switch along if it's really thick cover. So if this was the inside of a food plot and we're accessing on the far side, this was just like, you know, 100 yards away from a blind or stand, then that edge we wouldn't have switchgrass. There'd probably be a lot of scrapes and rubs along that. I hope that makes sense. We're using the switchgrass basically to offer a screening so it pulls deer, makes them feel safer closer to that food plot edge. Like a switchgrass line along hardwoods, or even along that woods down there. If we had switchgrass, then deer could bed 5 feet back from that switch and feel comfortable because they can't see out. But if they're going to look out across that field, they're less likely to bed on that edge. What we're going to do is we'll walk on this. We'll stay on this inside. We're actively growing buckwheat out here. It's the first crop. Well, actually, the first crop was rye. We terminated the rye, planted the buckwheat, and the buckwheat's coming in. We'll terminate that around the end of July, and then we'll plant our Big Boost 365 that has the perennial base. So, and we might do the Fall Power 365 and Big Boost. We'll divide this in half. But the whole idea is we want to have that cool season annual, and then next year it all turns to clover, which is the way we've established all our clover on the entire property. So anywhere we drive by, you see clover, that's the way we established it. Some of my greatest crop failures have been clover planted in the spring. You just get drought, it fizzles out and dies. So we have a spring drought attack clover blend. But even then, even online, people said, should I plant this or wait till fall? I'll say wait till fall, because that's more of a sure thing for getting your clover established long-term, especially because it seems like a lot of people don't successfully control weeds in the spring. Where if you're planting more around August 1st, you have plenty of time to control your weeds, get those under control before you plant the clover. Everyone's so excited to plant in the spring, they get plantings out, including clover, and they're overrun by weeds pretty quickly. And then you're kind of fighting an uphill battle.
So why clover?
We have clover, chicory, and alfalfa in there. There's a few thoughts on that. You know, in the past, for small plots, I'd encourage clover. In a northern setting, maybe layered rye, because it's more browse tolerant. Put 100 pounds down mid-August, 100 pounds down around Labor Day, 100 pounds down towards the end of September. So you're trying to create volume this way, not necessarily this way. And where if you planted all 300 pounds early, it'd get too tall and stemmy and dormant. They don't like it. That was a good hunting plot. You have to replant it every year, but it's more browse resistant. Here, when we have clover and you have the support of the big plots around, it just ends up being a pass-through. They're not coming to this to feed till dark. I call this a hunting plot. That big plot over there is a holding plot. They're going there and holding till dark, and they sit there until dark, and then they release out to the ag fields. So these clover plots, what's nice is a lot of our mature bucks, I'd say 2/3 of them, we don't see until September, October. And LL Beams, I hope he's still alive. Chad, I don't think you've had any intel on him, have you? Maybe had a picture of him in January. Crossing our fingers. But we wouldn't see him till typically hardhorn in mid-September or later. And Chad, would you get him during the summer?
Yeah, a little bit. He was between you and I.
Yeah. So I'm hoping he's alive, but a lot of those bucks we don't see until that time. And so when they do come through, if they come through during the summer, they'll hit one of these clover plots. They know it's here. We find they come back. So it makes it a great hunting plot. Because the clover has the complement of the big plots, it lasts a lot longer too. So we'll walk this right here, right along this edge, go out. I have another lane cut. We'll get back out here. That's our service lane. And then we'll stop back out here, see if you guys have any questions. And for right now, let's just take a walk through here and get down. And that's that 2.5 acre field. And then that supports a water hole on the other side. See those big oaks about 75 yards down, and shot a buck from there. And then there's a small skinny hunting plot about 150 yards from there. And then it goes another couple hundred yards, 300 yards to the end of the property down there. So it's kind of like, that's a core spot right there. But as we get closer to our edge, we don't want to have a big giant hunting plot all the way back in the corner that puts deer on the neighbors down in the valley, for example. So as we get closer to that edge, we might have a hunting plot, maybe a water hole. But our more food sources, big food, are concentrated more in, I would say, the heart of the property, but at least that right there would be at least 400 yards away from an edge. As far as not looking at the ag field, because someone's not hunting on the ag field as the deer are living in the ag field during the daylight and going to the food plot. Whereas if we put it next to someone's wooded border, they could actually live in someone else's woods. And that's actually what's happening in reverse down in the neighbor down the bottom. They have big food plots. We hold the bucks up on our property, and then they come out to those food plots because the food plots are right up against our land. So there's no cover in between. So it forces the deer, thankfully, to live on our property for 90% of the daylight, which is a good thing. So I encourage you not to do that. So that kind of is that system going that way. We're going to head back to the pole building.
Can I ask a question about the plots versus the field?
Yeah.
So are these connected with trail through the woods to get in between the two plots? And my question is,
not by us, but by deer.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
the problem I deal with
And that's like us.
lush fields alongside our woods and our plots. And like, I just feel like if I was here or there, they'd split the difference and come on out here where there's still crest guards them. You know, they still feel private.
We have a few. What's really crazy is I would say there is movement out here.
Yeah.
I would say 90% of the movement goes to that big plot. So you'll see some random ones out here. And I'm not saying there's a mature buck that doesn't cross out here sometimes, but for the most part, the mature bucks would settle around that food plot some way. They might not even come out it, but they'll hit the water hole right next to it, or they'll hit the little hunting plot beside it too. So they're really centering their daylight focus on that. It's hidden, it's safe. If that food plot was just as open as these ag fields, I think we'd get a higher percentage moving out here and on the other side of it. because they feel safe there. So it's flanked by really wide switchgrass going by that kestrel box all the way over to the hardwoods, or switchgrass around that. And that switchgrass extends either in thick cover or switchgrass for another 400 or 500 yards around the corner to the end of our property. So they feel really comfortable behind that bank. And when that whole big food plot, we try to make that very diverse. And that's where we want to really peak in October, November, December. We got rid of corn this year because we were tired of them eating it end of December, January, and peaking at that time. If they're peaking that time in corn, it really doesn't do us any good. We've already missed that portion of the season. So we're not planting that corn this year. Going back to something I planted almost 25 years ago, but it was beans, peas, and buckwheat. We added tillage radish to it. We're still putting 42 pounds of beans per acre. It's a quick maturing bean. And so by planting it around July 1st, then we still should have time to produce a pod and a bean. But then we have the tillage radish, the buckwheat that helps nurse the beans along. We're planting it after fawning period. So we don't want to plant that before fawning period and fill those big fields with fawns and does. We have enough on our clover right now. And you can see, I mean, the clover competing with this it's just more of a pass-through. But we're planting that.
Follow on to the same question, and I think it might have been addressed almost already between erosion and what you're doing. On this soft edge, was there any thought of a more long-term hard edge, like with cedars or spruces or whatever, that would, just like you said, coming out past the house where you want to extend the woods 50 yards, create more depth? Was there any thought of doing that instead of switch?
I like to switch just because I think it's a lot better for nesting birds. And so especially like that edge, I'm not saying a turkey wouldn't nest right out here, but they really like that edge right there where it meets the early successional growth briers. And then this pheasant escape cover is so critical. The cedars we have planted in a few spots, and that's kind of what we do. If there's 2 feet of snow in the switchgrass, what's crazy about that switch was likely down with heavy snow at some point during winter, and then in the spring it just pops right back up. And then the new growth comes and it pushes it down. Cedar is great for when there's deep snows. Those pheasants will go right up under the cedars, and then they're protected from the snow. So we like that. But it's kind of not that much different than the gray dogwood and sumac in there too. Yeah. They go into there. We see all their tracks through that time. So we'll let's go back and eat some lunch.